Clearly, a lot of people are triggered by the fact that Jews don't believe Jesus was the Mashiach. So my explanation comes from the Rambam, a Jewish scholar / expert on Jewish texts. So the Rambam's criteria for the Mashiach is as follows. Number 1, he has to be a descendant of King David. I know a lot of Christians believe that he was. However, there's really no way of knowing for sure. Number 2 is he has to get Jewish people to observe Jewish law. Most of the Jews that I know are not observant. Number 3, he has to have fought in wars. The Bible states that Jesus said to love your enemies, so he doesn't exactly sound like the fighting type. Number 4, he has to have brought all the Jews to Israel. I'm Jewish and live in America, so again, no. And the last one I'm going to mention is he has to have rebuilt the temple in its original spot. Last I checked, there was a mosque there.
So she said she leans on the Rambam, medieval Jewish rabbi, very prolific commentator on the Old Testament. He basically did a lot of interpretation based around Messianic prophecies and criteria. She's using a set of criteria to disqualify Jesus, but the very same set of criteria makes it nearly impossible for anyone else to be the Messiah. Being born in Bethlehem, being a descendant of David, rebuild the temple, be called out of Egypt, gather all the Jews back to Israel, create peace, restore all righteousness, would have to be cut off and die at some point. The Messiah would have to suffer for the sins of Israel. The Messiah would bring an end to temple sacrifices, which also by proxy means that the Messiah would have to come before the temple. So that basically rules out anyone after 70 AD. The Messiah would have to be both a priest and a king, according to other Jewish commentaries outside of Rambam. Consider that once the temple was actually destroyed, virtually no more records of lineage were kept. Even if a future figure had to come up claiming to be the Messiah, there is no way to prove that they are a descendant of David. We have textual, scriptural attestation that Jesus is a descendant of David. The thing that I find really interesting, though, is that the Messiah's name, that in his name the Gentiles will hope, in other words, non-Jews, would also be drawn to this figure. Other than Jesus, no figure has drawn so many non-Jews to their name. Jesus is basically one of the most known historical figures in the history of mankind. The wonderful thing about the New Testament here is that it really provides a lens for us to understand how Jesus does actually fulfill the criteria that she says is not fulfilled. Hebrews 5 verse 6 says that Jesus is a priest in the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek was known as a priest and a king. With the death of Jesus, his crucifixion is the atoning sacrifice. In scripture, it says that his death is the end of sacrifice. Aside from that, we have writings that says that when they offered their sacrifices, the crimson rope that indicated that God was pleased with their sacrifice stopped changing color. This would imply that God was not accepting sacrifices. When it comes to rebuilding the temple, Jesus says that he will rebuild the temple after 3 days. The temple he was speaking about was his body. When it comes to the Messiah bringing peace, the fact that there's still wars and conflict obviously seems to disqualify Jesus, right? But the New Testament tells us that Jesus did bring peace. He brought peace between man and God. The last thing the New Testament helps us to see is that there is a concept called progressive fulfillment. We see that some prophecies partially fulfilled and will continue to be fulfilled in the future. So Hebrews 2 verse 7 says, "You made him lower than the angels for a short time. You crowned him with glory and honor and subjected everything under his feet." This is the progressive fulfillment in action. So he says, "For in subjecting everything to him, he left nothing that is not subject to him. As it is, we do not yet see everything subjected to him, but we do see Jesus made lower than the angels for a short time, so that by God's grace he might taste death for everyone." What Paul's basically saying here is that we've seen a portion of this being fulfilled, the part where Jesus was made lower than angels. And so there's really a very wonderful reinterpretive lens that does fulfill the criteria that Jesus needs to fulfill for us to see him as the Messiah. I want to just come back to Rambam for a second. Although he was a very famous, prolific, influential commentator, he is not the only commentator, and he's not the only representative of a Jewish school of thought. The Rambam was not even influential on Judaism before the year 1000 AD. We've got writings and documents such as the Talmud, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Midrashim, and the Targums that actually really reveal Jewish theology and thought about the Messiah. Psalm 2 verse 7, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." The Talmud connects this to the Messiah. Midrash Tehillim also refers to this as the anointed king. In other words, my son, the anointed king, links the Messiah as being the son of God. Isaiah 9 verse 6. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, Mighty God. We've got Jewish writings that say this is the Messiah. So the Messiah is understood as a divine being and the Son of God, an anointed king. And we've got Daniel 7 from verse 13 to 14 that the Son of Man will come with the clouds of heaven. The Talmud, Sanhedrin 98a, speaks of a messianic figure who's exalted this way in a divine sense. And when you look at the New Testament, Jesus himself claims to be this very Son of Man as spoken of in Daniel. Every messianic candidate who has ever walked this earth, who has ever claimed to be the divine Son of God? If it's not Jesus, it's no one.